My name is Christina Schrantz, and today is April 5th, 2017. I am in Oklahoma City at Bishop McGuinness Catholic High School interviewing Sister Stephanie Sanchez as a part of the Spotlighting Oklahoma project for the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at the Oklahoma State University Library. Thank you for meeting with me today.
You're welcome.
Tell me a little bit about when you were growing up, when and where you were born.
I was born in Denver, Colorado in September 28th, 1945. And I lived in Denver until my 17th year. I was there for 17 years, went to grade school, went to high school, and it was around in my sophomore year that I chose to enter my community, which is the Carmelite Sisters of St. Therese, and I entered here when I was just a little bit before my 18th birthday, and I've been here ever since, except for a couple of years when I went to school at Marquette University in Milwaukee, and then I worked in Tulsa for approximately 8 years. So my years have been, the majority of them, in Oklahoma.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about growing up in Colorado.
Well, I have a brother and a sister, a mom and a dad. My mom and my dad are both deceased. My brother and my sister are still alive. My relatives all are in Denver. We were a Hispanic community, but we didn't speak Spanish. At that time in the world, you wanted to blend. So you didn't mention or you didn't emphasize the things that would distinguish you from others. And so I really didn't learn Spanish until I learned a little bit in grade school, learned more in high school, studied Spanish. My parents in my growing up years spoke Spanish to keep secrets from us until I learned enough to be able to, I know what you're saying. My parents were poor. We were poor, and they emphasized, however, education, and so we went to a Catholic grade school. We went to Catholic high school. In order to make that happen, my father worked several jobs to make that happen. I was a good student. I enjoyed studying. I enjoyed school. I was approximately a year and a couple months older than my brother. My brother was a year older than my sister, so my mom, when we were little kids, she had 3 under the age of 5, which I imagine was pretty much of a pain. You know, I watch little kids here, and they never stop. And so I lived behind my grandparents, my grandfather, my grandmother, my father's mother and father. My grandfather died when I was 8 years old, and my grandma lived forever after that. You know, I don't really know what time my grandmother, how old she was when she died. I was here in Oklahoma when she passed away. I came to Oklahoma after my aunt, who was probably the 3rd oldest of my father's brothers and sisters, entered this community. So when I was little, I used to come and visit with my grandmother. We'd take a bus from Denver here, and we'd spend a couple of weeks at what was then called Villa Teresa, the villa where I spent the majority of my living years in the community, which is now property up for sale. But I lived there, and that's what I knew primarily, you know, from here. I was a normal kid. I was pretty much a tomboy. I played a lot of sports, most of just around the neighborhood, because my grade school didn't have any kind of sports, you know, for girls. That didn't happen until, the 60s? That was a long time later. I don't know, is that enough?
Yes, that's plenty. So growing up, going to the Carmelite community, did you kind of know that was a path you were considering? Or?
Well, when I was little, I thought about becoming a sister, but I concluded I wasn't holy enough. I thought you had to be really holy to be a sister, and so I kind of put it out of my mind. And when I chose to do this, it happened when my aunt came to visit, Sister Joan Marie Sanchez, came to visit just before she was going to Guatemala to be a missionary at our mission in San Carlos, Sija, and she had told me that if I didn't write to her, she was going to blackball me from her prayers. So I was sharing with my mother one night, and she said to me, "Oh, don't you know?" Now, we weren't talking like we're talking now. She was preparing something at the stove. I was making salad, and I was just making conversation. At that point, I was the oldest niece, oldest granddaughter in the family. And the community required sisters in the community to travel with another female if you were going to travel with any male. And it didn't make any difference whether they were your brother, your sister, father. It was just the way it was. It was kind of a, what would we want to say, preview of what today, like priests have to be careful about, just being with one, that kind of stuff. But for whatever reason, they just didn't want to cause scandal. So I was chosen to be her companion. And so my mom said, "Oh, don't you know that she has the community praying for you to become a sister?" Well, no, I didn't know, and I was struck dumbless. I didn't know what to say. And so I didn't say anything. But I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, if they think, they on their side think I could become a sister, well, maybe I can. So I wrote to the community and asked for all the paperwork. Now remember, I was a freshman going into my sophomore year and not of age to do any of this stuff. But I didn't. I had my brother and my sister watch the mail, and we stole the letter. And I filled it all out and put it in the bottom of a jar. And I never told my parents about this whole situation. It finally came out when I was a senior. Now, between my sophomore year and probably my junior year, my father injured his back. He was at a wedding for his younger brother, and they had beer, had a keg of beer, and my dad picked it up, and he hurt his back. And his injury was exacerbated with his work. He worked for M.T. Girton, which was a construction kind of place. And in those days, you didn't get time off for sick leave, you didn't get time off for any of that kind of stuff. And so my dad had to work or else we didn't eat, So at any rate, I knew that we didn't have enough money for them to pay for the junior year expensive rings, all that kind of stuff. So I never told them, okay? And you say, why am I mentioning that? Because just before Christmas of my senior year, my mother said to me, probably 3 or 4 days before Christmas, she kept saying to me, "What do you want for Christmas? What do you want for Christmas?" Now, my sister knew what I intended to do. My brother knew, but he wasn't involved with as much. And I finally said to my mom, look, this is what's going to happen. Now, notice, I didn't ask him. I just told him. And I said, I'm going to enter the community. And then I pulled out the paperwork and said, this is, and they were kind of struck dumb. They didn't say anything. They were not against it. They just didn't know what to say. This is what I'm going to do. And so they tried to make that last Christmas the best Christmas. They got me a class ring. They did several things. Now, my sister had been saying, ask for this, ask for that, ask for that. I said, Beverly, I don't need it. She said, but I want it. I said, Bev. Anyway, so I spent the rest of the year, just not like this is the last. I don't really do that kind of thing, but I did spend the summer before I came working with migrant workers in northern Colorado in, I think it was Fort Lupton, Colorado, and learned a lot about what it takes to be a migrant worker. We went one day and picked potatoes, and we got a chance to pick potatoes. Never picked potatoes, except for in the store. And you had to wear this belt that had a piece of wood in the front with 2 hooks. And then there were a couple hooks on the side where you put the empty bags. And we're talking about those 50-pound bags, huh? Okay, and so when you pick potatoes, a machine comes along and turns the dirt over, and then you go and you pick them. And the folks got 5 cents a bag for 50 pounds of potatoes. Now, if you were really good as a picker, you could maybe earn $2.50 a day picking potatoes. Well, I decided that that's not something I wanted to do. I mean, it was tough because you drag that bag between your legs and you put the potatoes in. So it was interesting. I appreciated being there and working with the migrant workers. The folks I was with There was actually 2 girls from Milwaukee, one going to, I think it's St. Mary's College, and the other one may have come from Milwaukee, from Marquette, where I eventually went, who came down and helped us, and then there were 3 or 4 of us that worked with them. I spent the summer there, and then I entered my community in August, and been here ever since.
What was it like living in the community?
Well, at first, my community was about 100 when I entered, and it was in the 60s. I entered just after my senior year in, I think, 62, 63, thereabouts. And you know that in those years there was a lot of foment. Things were changing. You had the council. A lot of women who entered religious life entered because there was not another way for them to serve the church. If you wanted to be a servant of the church, you had to be a sister. You know, you didn't have Eucharistic ministers, you didn't have religious ed teachers. You know, if you were a sister, you could do a lot of things. But if you weren't, you didn't have access to that. So there were a lot of people who entered who really didn't belong. And they came to know that. So my community had several people who left because they decided that that wasn't their life. And so it was very, when I was in the novitiate, it was very, I don't know the word I want, a little bit unsettling. As a novice, we lived in a house, actually, that one of our students lives in, 400 Northwest 16th Street. Dr. Ruffin purchased that house from my community. That was our novitiate house, and that's where I spent my first 2 years. So we were pretty much separated from what was going on at the villa. And there were a group of, I guess there were a couple of groups in the community, one that wanted to work in California and emphasize California, and then the group that said, no, we were founded to work in Oklahoma, this is what we got to do. Eventually the community split, and we were kept out of those novices. Were kept out of all of the stuff until we made first vows, and then we went over to the villa. And by that time, maybe about a third of the community chose to go with the one group, and they went to California, and they started some ministries there working with children and stuff. And then the community kept on. Well, age and attrition, and it's just created some problems. We're a very small community now, about 13, 14 people. And we haven't had a novice, we haven't had a postulant in years. We've had a lot of people visit us, and I'm glad to say some of them have entered other communities. So we've been kind of a help for them there. It's been good, but there were situations when people who were my friends chose to leave. It always made me ask the question, why them and not me? You know, and I just came to realize that I didn't share their understanding. I didn't share their beliefs. I didn't say they were wrong. I just didn't share them. And they went one direction, I went the other. That's hard. I found that difficult. And, you know, obviously there were sometimes we could talk about it, sometimes we couldn't. There is my community when I was little and I came to visit, I always felt like it was home and a safe place. The sisters were always very kind, very supportive, and that's what I found. That community life is very supportive. It's not supportive like we against the world, but it's meant to help each individual really live Christian life. And I think I could say that we're given by way of what's called the horarium, the way the schedule is set up, the way we work, what our constitutions say, so that we can minimize the distractions, so that we can maximize those things that would help us get closer to God, which is a plus. I mean, is that not, my understanding is what Christian life, Catholic life is all about, to get closer to God. And so I think I have the lucky road in that a lot of things are eliminated for me to help me on that. Doesn't mean I'm a saint or anything like that, but there are a lot of things that are just not part of our life. Like for example, shopping trips, for Christmas shopping, go and buy this. I don't even think about that. Ideas of who's top dog? Do I have a job that, that gets me the maximum money and I can tell other people what to do? I don't even think about that. The object of the game is, as far as I understand it, is to understand who Christ is and how do I live like him to the best of my ability. And so the community life is meant to help you. And of course, there are times when it's not fun. The hardest, I've been telling the kids, I've been speaking to Mrs. Allen's students about being religious. Probably the hardest vow in actuality is obedience, where you will accept another person's decisions. Now, luckily, after the council, since '63, superiors and their inferiors, and that doesn't mean one's better than, but the superior of the community will discuss with a sister, a particular placement or a particular work, and we'll take that really into consideration. I've heard sisters say that in the early years of the community, that wasn't the case. You could just be moved in the middle of the year. You could just be told, you're going to do this. And even if you weren't exactly prepared for it, the whole idea is obedience would get you to do that. Well, luckily, I've been freed from that kind of thing. Only once or twice have I had situations where I've knocked heads with my superior, about a particular event. Otherwise, it's been okay. It's been good. I think it's been very helpful, and hopefully I've helped the others in my community. I'm sure I've probably been a pain in the neck to them on occasion, but at any rate.
How did you get into teaching? Was that just a part of what you did at the community, or was that something you pursued?
No, as a kid, I think I would describe myself as very quiet. In high school, I hated speech. I did not get in any kind of place. I did not like being in the public eye. However, I was forced to take speech in high school. I took art my first year, and it's not that I'm a great artist, but I wanted to take it my sophomore year. And my mother and the art teacher decided that I wasn't talented enough, and so they decided I would take speech, and I didn't want to take speech, but I had to. Okay, so I took speech there, and I think I helped in a couple of plays, mostly in terms of being in the choir kind of thing, backup. Then I entered my community when I was 18. I turned 18 in September, and we started in the classes in the novitiate, and we didn't have to work very hard, primarily because the priest that taught us, he did most of the work for us, and we had philosophy and theology classes. Then we went to first year for St. Gregory's, and there were 30 nursing students from St. Anthony's Hospital and 5 sisters, and we went by bus. So when I went there, they decided there I had to take speech again. I told them I didn't want to take speech. Well, I was gifted with that again. All right, so we could only be there a year because with the hours that we got from the philosophy and theology, and then the years we got that year we were there, we had enough credits to really be a junior. And so we couldn't stay there. Okay, so then I was asked, well, where would you like to finish off? And I had an experience in theology class with a priest, Father William Love, who was a member of the Benedictines. Now understand that there were like 400 guys and these 30 girls and 5 sisters. Now I didn't care about the guys. I wasn't involved with them. The girls thought this was great. How many girls, how many guys could you have? Well, they spent a lot of their free time kind of hanging out in what would be the, I don't know what you call it now, where they could, play and stuff. The sisters had to study because we left in the morning at 7, we got home at 7, We had recreation, lights were out at 10, and they meant it, they came along. Anyway, I had to take another speech class. So then I had problems with Father William Love White, not because he was a bad guy or anything, but he would ask us questions. And all the guys who were in my class, usually there was like one female or two females and all guys. And all of these guys did come from Catholic situations in the East. Why did they come to St. Gregory's? Because they couldn't get into college in the East. They weren't great students. Okay, all right. And so I didn't know how to answer the questions. None of the guys did. And I felt really stupid. And I decided that if I had the opportunity, I was going to study theology, and I was going to come back, and I was going to give them a piece of my mind. Because I figured that there had to be reasons, like, why are you a Catholic? Well, my parents were Catholic. My grandparents were Catholic. But what else would you be? I mean, I came out of a Catholic ghetto. You didn't even ask those questions. I didn't know any Protestants growing up, except for my dad's insurance agent was actually not Protestant, was Jewish. Only person I knew who wasn't Catholic. Okay, that being the case. So I told my superior, I'd like to study theology. And she said, well, I'll give you two choices. Duquesne University, I think it's in Pittsburgh, or Marquette University in Milwaukee. I heard about Bernard Cook in Milwaukee, so could I choose that? She said, yes. Okay, so then I went up there, and then the object was to major in education and theology. But I misunderstood my counselor. I thought he said I couldn't. The long and short of it is, I had to take another speech course. And we went into the speech course, a 2-hour course, and you know what 2-hour courses are like. And this guy it's like you were standing in front of somebody with this huge gun. And he was saying, you have to do this, you have to do that. Now, my major was theology, and I was carrying a maximum load. I think I carried 18 hours my years that I was at Marquette, so I didn't have a lot of time to mess around. I thought, what do I want to do all this stuff for this speech class? So, okay, there was a whole room full of kids. So the next day we met, like it was half. And the guy said, well, I guess I did my job. What? He just scared everybody away. Well, my point to you was that I learned, and this guy would ask me like different questions from the kids, more in the area of faith, kind of. You had to demonstrate this, you had to prove this, you had to do this. It's different than the other kids. So I had speech. Now, when it came time for me to be told by my superior, what do you want to do post-Marquette? I really didn't know. I didn't consider myself a teacher, but she said, well, I think you could work at St. James. And at St. James, what they had in mind for me was the director of religious education. That meant you worked with the kids on Saturday morning and worked in the school. And my pastor wanted that person to be like the coordinator of both the school religion program and the CCD. So I worked in the school and I worked in the Saturday CCD program. And the kids that would come off the bus, we used a bus on Saturdays, who would throw daggers at me. Like, I didn't choose this, but we got better, and the kids liked it. We had religious education from like 9 to 12 every Saturday, and then I started teaching for a second grade. I learned how to teach. So I think in the end, those dumb speech classes helped me. And I guess I fell into teaching by accident. I learned, I guess what I would say is the power of teaching. Periodically, when you were teaching a given topic, all of a sudden you became aware of the fact that the people you were working with were they were in the palm of your hand. And you could say anything you wanted, and they would buy into it. And it was really quite amazing to me. And I felt like you owed them a real attempt to share the best you had in terms of faith. Because I've always taught in the area of theology. And I have a master's degree in theology. I have a BA in theology because I was going to be William Love, you know. And so the more I've taught, the more I've seen it as an opportunity, really, that goes two ways. One, sharing with whomever I'm working with, whether it was adults or kids, and then they in turn sharing with me. In working with older children, I have worked with preschoolers all the way through adults. Obviously, working with preschoolers and first, second, third graders early, it's a whole different ballgame, you know, than you can with older kids here at school. You know, one of the things I have found refreshing and hopefully been open enough to accept their questions and not say, that's stupid, let's go on to the next question. They have a right to ask questions because I believe that the faith and our beliefs have a reason for them, and therefore you can explain it as long as the person who asks the question is willing to do a little work and ask questions and think, you know, because it's not just something where you open your mouth and like a baby bird you get fed. So I have always found working with especially older students and adults that I have grown in my faith. I've learned a lot, and I can go back and think of situations where kids have said things I thought, wow, I never thought about that. So it's been a plus. That's how I got into it. So now it's like, what else would I do? And now I don't teach as such. I don't have a class because of all the computer. I and the computer, we're not friends. We're just not friends. And so I'm sort of just here, kind of, I support the teams. I am the permanent sub for theology, give and take. I take tickets, I talk with people that way. And if somebody needs somebody to talk about X or Y or Z, I'll do that. You know, so that's kind of what I do now, you know. Anyway.
How exactly did you end up at McGuinness?
Well, I had worked at St. James for 5 years, and the Diocese of Tulsa separated from the Diocese of Oklahoma City. They started a new diocese. And the priest who was the director of education worked with our community, and he asked for my superior if I could come there. And I told her, you know, I'm just barely getting my feet wet in terms of what it means to be parish director. Father Donovan says you can do the job. Okay, I'm not sure about this. So I worked in Tulsa for 8 years, and he told me that my responsibility there was 80% the rural areas, and I fell out of my chair, and I thought, he expects me to be out of this office 80% of the time, and he said, no. But the rural parishes, which there are most, okay, couldn't afford a person of my caliber. Like, he thought more of me than I thought of me in terms of background. But, you know, a master's degree in theology, when you went into these rural areas, they didn't have a lot of background. Usually smaller communities of Catholics. We're talking about 2 to 3% Catholic in those rural areas. A lot of prejudice, to be perfectly honest with you, against the Catholics. It's amazing. Anyway, so that was my responsibility. So I worked there for 8 years, and I grew. I can't even describe for you. I mean, I could describe for you some of the events which helped me to understand what it meant to be a person of faith in an area that wasn't Catholic. And I came to really appreciate the faith so much more. Well, it came time, I was there for 8 years, and I knew I would not be there for all of my life. And so I had my mind set about not building a kingdom. And this is mine. I'm the coordinator. I'm the God of the, you know, and I just kind of kept in the back of my mind that I'm going to be asked by the community to come back. And so they did. And that first year I was a gopher. And that was the first time I actually had a little tussle with my superior. The people in Oklahoma City had a religious education conference in the summertime, and they asked me if I would speak at it. And I told them, well, you know, I'm not sure what my schedule's going to have. I don't know what they're going to ask of me. Let's just hold on, and when I get there, I'll ask. Okay, so I got I got there and I asked my superior. She said, "You're not going to do it." I said, "Can we talk about this?" "Nope, you're not going to do it." "Fine, okay, it's your charge." So they called me from Oklahoma City, the office, said, "Are you?" And I said, "I'm not able to do it." And they said, "Whoops, we have you on the schedule." Well, then the schedule came out, and my superior got a hold of that schedule. She said, "You're going to do it." I said, "I'm not going to do it. You told me I couldn't. You did not want to talk about it." This is where probably I'm a little more stubborn than most. "You wouldn't talk about it then. We're not going to do it." "But what will people think?" I said, "Well, what they'll think is that I got sick, something happened," because that happens all the time, not every time, but stuff comes up, an accident, somebody gets sick, and so I didn't go. But it was at that point that I realized the importance of trying to get my superiors to understand that, sometimes there are things you need to discuss. You just can't summarily say, "No, you can't do that." What are the consequences? Anyway, that was my first. Well, then, after that year, my major superior, the superior of the community, the other person was just the superior in the house. She said, "Would you be interested in teaching high school?" I said, "I haven't." And she said, "Well, let's just try." So she had me that first spring of 1981, subbing. So I came in and I was plugged in here and plugged in there. And of course, you don't really teach as a sub. You just kind of keep the natives quiet. And so she said, "Would you like to teach there?" And I said, "Well, I guess." So I started. And I don't know that I really understood all the implications, all the preparation, the grading, all that sort of thing. I was teaching freshmen, primarily, if I recall correctly, and then eventually, in my years here, 37, because I started in 1981, the fall 1981, so you add it up. I have taught every year, and I have taught freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors. Group I've taught probably the least amount, not because I don't like them, it's just schedule-wise, are sophomores. And I did kind of specialize in the religion classes that kids could choose. I did world religions. I did a faith and literature class. What else? I don't know. So that's really how I got into it. And the more times I did it, the more I liked it. And one of the reasons why I have stayed at McGuinness is because if you want a faith in the church, then you have to work with the kids. You have to help them understand how important this is. You have to give them some rationale. And so, I didn't believe that working with these teenagers, that like they were second-class citizens. You had to help them to see the benefits of faith and what it took. And so that's why I've worked here. And of course, each year I've come to know a little bit more of what it requires as a teacher.
How has McGuinness changed since you've been here? Since, like you've said, you've been here for about 37 years. That's a pretty good time.
Well, one of the things that's remained pretty consistent about McGuinness is that there's been a group of people who've stayed. There hasn't been turnover every year, massive turnover. We've had 1 or 2 or 3 teachers, 4 teachers. I think the most I recall is maybe 8 or 9 teachers leaving. But the majority of teachers have been here a long time, which adds to a stability. McGuinness is like a big family, or like a tree that just keeps adding rings. And there's some plus and some minuses. I know kids go to school now. I taught their parents. And it's amazing, You see them, you say, aha, they actually grew up. They actually, and it's amazing to see the transformation. So that's been one of the pluses, is to see that communal aspect and that caring aspect. We got grandparents who had their children go to the school, and they may not have grandparents now, or grandkids here, but they're interested in this place, okay? obviously, students have changed. Environment has changed. I don't think it's been bad. I don't think our kids are bad kids. They've been gifted with a world. It's pretty scary sometimes. The things that are afforded them. Here at school, a lot of our kids have a lot of stuff. Not necessarily all the best, you know, they don't necessarily make the best decisions. But I've never found the kids to be so obnoxious, so hard to deal with. Some people talk about kids in, you know, the public schools as there's a big difference. I have found the kids very open, very helpful. Although, you know, you got to work a little bit because I think our kids, you know, listen to TV. They've got so many things to listen to that offer them other examples of things, other things to choose. You have to give them better reasons to choose X or Y or Z. Same thing with the teachers in actuality. I believe that I have an inside track on what it means to be holy, what it means to be a believer in God, and I have a community that supports me. Other people don't, and they have to work a lot harder. I think I'm gifted in that I don't have children that I have to worry about. I wonder sometimes among the faculty who have young kids, how do they do it? How do they grade? How do they prepare? How do they take care of their little kids? You know, how are they here? How are they there? I don't have that worry, you know. I do tell the kids, you know, the best thing about teaching them is none of them are where I live, you know. And it's not because they're obnoxious or anything, but there's a certain care, and I pray for them a lot. And when I go to bed at night, I'm not sitting there, or I'm not sitting in a chair waiting for my kid to come home. You know, and luckily, I have to knock on wood, we haven't ever had a kid die in an accident in dealing with alcohol or drugs. We've had some accidents that dealt with alcohol and drugs, but we have not lost a kid, which is a plus, you know. But they've worked hard to remind the kids, you got to be careful about the decisions you make. There are consequences. So, I mean, it's the same and yet different because our kids just come with a value system that's much different. And of course, their parents, I think some of our parents are very dedicated to their children in the sense that they make choices about life with the kids in mind first and themselves second. I think there are parents who don't do that. And that creates some problems with our kids. I mean, our kids, they're loved, but not with what I would consider appropriate love. You gotta say no to kids. I'm sorry. You just have to say no at some times. And kids will not be happy. They will not be happy. But in the end, unless they understand that there are some parameters, we have problems. And you know what I'm talking about. I mean, you're in college, you know that there's all kind of options, and mom and dad are not there to protect you or to guide you. I mean, you can post facto talk to them, but you have to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. You have to learn, hey, this is what I'm about, this is what I'm for, and you need to let that be your guide. I think sometimes some parents want to be friends with their kids, and parents can be friends, but that's not the first thing, I would say, you know. So that's been a difference, you know. My parents were disciplinarians, and we knew what was expected of us, and there wasn't a court of appeal. You know, if they told us not to do X, and we did it, when we got home, bam, you got the whatever. I'm not sure that our kids have that, and I'm not sure that they're not missing out. Now, when I say that, there are some families very strong, and they hold their kids, you know, feet to the fire. You said, you know, you were going to do this or you were going to do that. For example, there have been some parents whose kid, you know, say goes out for a sport. They decide, I don't like it. It's too much work. And the parent will say to them, well, you said you were going to do this. You stay with it for this semester, or you stay for it this year, and then you can choose to do something different next year. Why? Because you said you were going to do it. You just can't walk away. So I don't know if that helps you, but I mean, obviously the culture has changed things. And of course, with a culture that by and large wants to negate belief in God, belief in religious practice as something important to life, it creates some challenges. Both in terms of teaching kids and saying, this is really important. You need to really think about this. And you need to understand why it's important and go from there.
Is that something you've noticed you've had to address more and more?
Oh, yeah. Because all you have to do is look at some of the things that, some of our leaders do, our rock stars, all of those idols, how many of them, oh, we're married, we're going to have kids. Are you married, really? Are you going to stick around with each other? It's just like you can't depend, or very few of them can you depend upon to be examples of honesty, integrity, that sort of thing. And so, you say to kids, this is really important. Bill Cosby, I've always thought was an upright guy, and look what transpired. We as human beings, it's not that I'm throwing rocks, because we as human beings are capable of doing a lot of things, that are not good. But in relationship to younger people, you have a responsibility. I get very angry, and so far here at school, I don't believe we've had teachers who have been really bad examples for the kids. Now, I haven't agreed with some of the students, the teachers, where they talk about students, I don't think that's so good. But by and large, there's not been anybody who, as far as I know, has, like that guy that's being sought who groomed the young girl and then kidnapped her. He was a sophomore in high school, and he's a teacher for 20 years. We don't have that. I think there is an understood line you don't cross with kids, So I think our people understand that and try to be appropriate in that sort of thing. And it's a good thing to be a part of it, because, how many times do we read about, teachers who misuse, who abuse that very sacred relationship with kids. Kids, in some instances, you tell them to jump, they just say how high. That's just not appropriate to misuse, or to abuse. Anyway.
One thing that I'm really interested from being here and watching you is how much you love the athletic programs. How exactly did that, have you just always had a love for athletics?
I have liked athletics, but one of the things I learned early on here at school is that if you saw the kids in another venue other than in the classroom, like if you watched them play sports or you watched them in a play, and you could say to them, you played very well, or you did really well in that play, you had a much easier time with them in the classroom. And so part of it is I've just always enjoyed. I did play sports. I was a tomboy. I came out of a grade school that had no sports for girls. At that time, they didn't exist. At least in my school, I've always been interested. I've played, softball. Used to play touch football and stuff. Played volleyball around the neighborhood, and so I've always enjoyed it. And then I played basketball when I was in high school. Played softball. So it's been a way to involve myself with students, so that my class with them is a little easier to deal with. And it's sort of self-serving in that I enjoy it, but also they listen to me a little bit more when I talk about Jesus, because I was at their game and I could say to them, like last night, a couple kids came in, and I don't know all the kids' names. I'm not having a class, but I do know that this one kid hit a home run. Baseball teams had a tough time this year. Day before yesterday, they had won 4 and lost 12. That's not a great year. One game they lost with 7 errors. You don't win games, 7 errors. Anyway, they won, and one of these guys hit a home run. So I said to him, hey, good shot. Ah, thank you. So it's a way in which you can see the kids in another venue, and you have the opportunity to compliment them. Not everybody is a student. Now, you can do what you're supposed to do, i.e., turn in your work, do the best you can on test, but you may stand out more, in a particular sport that you can be complimented for and be supported in. So I do that, and I just enjoy watching the kids. It's like my kids. I don't have any kids myself. These are my kids, and I'll argue with anybody who wants to put our kids down. In the past, I've been in situations, people come up to me and say, can't you see what your kids are doing? And first of all, I'm not an administrator. I'm not the disciplinarian. Will I discipline them? Yes, I will. Will I call them to accountability? Yes, I will. But are you watching your kids? I'm trying to keep our kids, but you're coming over here looking for trouble. What do you want from me? Anyway, that's what I found. It's just, I enjoy it. I like to watch sports. I like to watch the kids. When it comes time for state championships, if our kids are not there, I'm not going. I have other things I'm supposed to be doing. Anyway, okay?
How did you feel about the new snack stand being named after you?
I was embarrassed. I was really embarrassed. I mean, I really try to do things without looking for pats on the back. Does that make sense? As a religious, I believe that we're put out in the garden of the Lord, in the vineyard of the Lord, and there's certain work we're called to do. Period. Whether we get a pat on the back or not. Okay, and so here this snack bar. Nobody asked me. Nobody told me. Nobody said, do you think this is a good idea? If they had asked me, I would say, no, you have to do that. Mr. Morton had told me it was in the football season, and I have an understanding. I work tickets, and then I get to watch the game. And so he said, now you're going to be there at the game. I said, yeah. Okay, you're going to be there at halftime. Well, David, where am I going to be? Yes, well, that particular game, somebody started talking with me, and I didn't come right over. And he sent 2 policemen for me. What is going on? Meanwhile, they had this over there. Okay. So he asked me, will you help us unveil this thing? Sure, fine. I don't care. I didn't know they were going to do this. So they had this really thick rope, and they gave me this pair of scissors. And I was trying to cut it, and it wouldn't cut. So I had my head down, and it finally went down. Everybody started clapping. Oh, what's going on? I looked at it. Oh, man. I would never have chosen it. I appreciate it. Thank you, but I just don't know that I would have wanted my name associated with that. None of that is bad, the Loves wanted it. What the Loves want, the Loves get. So, thank you. But it's interesting. I don't know where I was. I think I was taking tickets at a soccer game, if I'm not mistaken, or I was outside, not here, and this gentleman came to me and said to me, you take tickets at Bishop McGuinness? I said, yes, I do. And he said, what's your name? And I said, Sister Stephanie Sanchez. Was that snack bar named for you? I said, yes. He said, my kids think that's so cool, and they are so excited to have to eat snacks from Sister Sanchez's. And I figured it's just packaged stuff, so it's been a source of discussion with people, and people are pretty, but sometimes the kids come, is that you in that picture? Yes. Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay. So, I wouldn't have chosen it, that they chose it. What can I say? They did it, and I don't know. I just think you work and you don't necessarily get a lot of accolades. That's how I've worked. Whether I do a good job at it, I don't know. I have a lot of people who pat me on the back, and a lot of people take care of me. I'm pretty spoiled that way. Anyway,
Do you think a lot of your values on that stuff comes from your family or from the Carmelite community?
Well, I think the community. I think my family, even as a kid growing up, I was the oldest child, and I was told that I was responsible for my brother and my sister, and I took that as gospel word, and so I protected. I watched out for. I even had a couple fights on behalf of my brother and my sister. Somebody older was, we were playing after school in a, I'm not sure what you'd call it now, but it was an after school kind of care. And my brother was playing off, and he was digging in the ground, and one of my classmates came along, and he hit his shoe with some dirt. Like really bad, huh? And so the guy said, "Do it again. You do that again, I'm gonna hit you." So my brother did it again. And so the guy was gonna knock his socks off, and he came running to me, and he got behind me. And this guy came up ready to, pound my brother. And I said, "You're not gonna hit him. You're not gonna do anything to him. If you're gonna do something to him, you're gonna have to go through me." Now, this guy was pretty tall, pretty big. And so he said, "Well, I'm not gonna hit a girl." And I thought, phew, it's a good thing. So I turned around to my brother. I said, "What did you do?" And he told him, I said, "Well, the next time, could you not do that?" So I think I was just expected, and so it's been part of part of who I am. And as a religious, we, in our constitutions, we talk about doing work with humility, taking on work that maybe other people might not, because it's, in the rural areas, you don't necessarily get lots of pats on the back and stuff. And it's not that people don't appreciate the religious, but you understand what I mean. You're not going to necessarily get the biggest salaries or get the most notability. I just think that's what you're supposed to do. So I would say probably a little bit from my family and lots from the community. Hopefully, I'm sort of humble, probably not real, but at any rate, that's what I'd say.
Going back to your career as a teacher, do you miss not teaching now?
I miss the interaction with kids. I miss dialoguing with them and, say, taking a passage from the scripture or taking an idea and developing it and letting them respond. I do not miss at all the grading, the planning, especially towards the end, working on the computer. There were things that just were beyond my scope. The first time we put grades in the computer, and this is a long time ago, I was working in the library because we didn't even have computers in our rooms. So you had to go to the library. Okay, so I had a free hour, put all these grades in. I pressed the little button. Everybody had an F. Everybody in my class had an F, and I just looked at this and thought, this is dumb. These kids don't have Fs, and I didn't know what I'd done wrong. And so I asked the people in the library, and they didn't know what I did wrong. We'll go get Mr. Looper, who was at that point, he was like Mr. Epps' position, but he was also the computer guru. And the bell had rung, I had class. And so I said, "I gotta go to class." They said, No, let's wait for Mr. Looper. I said, kids. So he came in, I explained, he said, "What did you do?" I said, "If I knew what I did, I wouldn't have done it." And I explained to him, look, I put all these grades in. You can see everybody can't have an F. I mean, here's somebody who's got all A's. That's what it's supposed to be. So you just put one number in, and everything changed. So there's always been a little bit of a stuff beyond me in terms of the computer. So I don't miss that at all. Now, I still work with the computer. I mean, I do the prayer intentions on the computer. I send them out sometimes. Mr. Welch is my backup guy in terms of, "Okay, Joe, what's going on here? What do I do here?" And he helps me. And I don't miss that even a little bit. But the interaction, every now and again somebody will say, "Okay, come in and would you talk with the kids about, or would you do that?" I miss that. I wish that were more of a part of my work here. But on the other hand, I get to deal with kids in non-classroom situations, like talking with them at games or wishing them good luck, or complimenting them, if they've done a play or something. You really did well. Or I'll say to them, "Hey, could you in basketball try to put a little air underneath your feet if you're going to get a rebound. I mean, you can't get rebounds with your feet glued to the floor. Okay, sister, okay. So I miss that real interaction, but I don't miss the technical stuff, the grading, the planning. I mean, I've got the best of both worlds, kind of, Anyway, that's what I'm saying.
How exactly do you think that this drive towards more technology has kind of affected the way that we teach or the way that education is run now?
Well, I hear the teachers basically saying is that a lot of times the kids play on the machine even when they're in class. I'm not sure that all of the kids understand how to use the technology. And even though I'm not great with computers, I understand that like the internet is a source of incredible knowledge. But you have to learn how to filter. Just because you see it typed on the screen does not necessarily mean that it's true. So you gotta be willing to search and question what is told for you. I'm not certain that kids are not more prone to working with things than being open to people. It drives me crazy to watch kids sitting next to each other, texting. Excuse me, right next to you is a person. I've heard of kids, in the same house, one upstairs, downstairs, texting each other instead of talking, or at dinner tables and stuff like that. I don't like it. I have a phone. I've got one of those flip phones, and it's an oldie but goldie. I do know how to text. I don't know who taught me to text, but I'm not great. But it's not the first thing I pull out of my pocket. I am floored, when we go, the bell rings and the first thing out, and kids, is the phone. And then you and I both know that they are like mini computers by and large. I'm not sure that we have not done human beings a disservice, teaching people how to interact and keeping things as a support, not replacing them. As teachers, I think some teachers are really, really good so that they give kids access to all of that knowledge, all of that information, teaching them how to ferret out what's appropriate, what's supported, and not just, say, hey, anything you teach. Of course, kids can misuse. I had a kid, maybe I shouldn't share this, but I had a kid, we used to do a faith project. And it's a great opportunity. They got to examine where their faith come, where their family, Anyway, read the faith project, and I'm reading the first part of it and thinking, this kid didn't write this. You think, how do you know? It's just not his style. So, and I'm not good at finding out, but I did. I found an intro to a piece that was almost word for word of what this kid wrote. And so I called the parent and I told her, and she said to me, well, my kid's a really good writer. And I said to her, I understand that he is a good writer, a better writer than most, but he couldn't have used the same words. And I thought, man, lady, your kid just took all this stuff. So I think, it's really difficult because it's so easy for kids to take the shortcuts. I'm not sure they all think really well. I think they use all that stuff. I'm not certain that you can't do a good job, but you have to work hard at it. And I think there are teachers here do really well, in terms of that. And, you can save yourself even grading times, putting it online. I'm not sure, though, right now, I get pretty tired. My eyes get pretty tired reading screens if I'm, doing something for a long time. But I'd say it's something you have to really work at. And I don't know if all the teachers are as vigilant as they should be. That's a judgment being on the outside looking in. When I sub and the kids are given stuff on the computer, I don't walk around the rooms, aha, but at any rate, it's kind of what it is.
So you've taught in Oklahoma for a really long time. Has there been anything in particular that you've really noticed in the way that Oklahoma education specifically has changed or has developed?
Well, I would have to say the present problem with the constant cuts to classes, to schools, you know, can't help education. And teaching in a Catholic school, however, because we have to pay our way, well then, you know, you're not going to find classrooms that are going to be jacked up from, say, 20 to 25 or 20 to 30 kids and cutting out teachers in order to do that. I just can't imagine why they keep cutting the education budgets, expecting teachers to do a great job. The second thing is, you know, the mandated requirements of how you judge a teacher when the kids do well on this test or that sort of thing. I'm not so sure that that's a good deal, because I've heard teachers who work in the public schools say people teach to the test. You know, is what's on the test really what is the most important thing to teach? So I think Oklahoma has, I'm not sure how or why, but we keep cutting budgets where children can't say anything. Parents at least are starting to get much more involved with it and saying, wait a minute, cut it out here. Let's cut someplace else. Now, I'm not sure where. This terrible problem we're having in the state is impacting everybody, and especially impacts schools. And I think that's very, very, very poor. I can't imagine that class sizes in being bigger is good for kids, especially children who have maybe some learning challenges or a little behind. How does a teacher meet with that? So I think that's a very, very important, significant thing. You know, they don't seem to, they just keep cutting, you know. We've got to cut someplace, so we'll cut here, we'll cut there. I'd like to cut budgets of the people in the House and, you know, Congress and all that stuff, so that they live like the rest of humankind, you know, with budgets and stuff, you know, not spend everybody else's money for frivolous stuff. Anyway, that's what I would say.
So we're coming towards the end of the interview. Is there anything in particular that you want to bring up or talk about your experience, your work as a teacher here, specifically Bishop McGuinness?
Well, I think that I've been gifted. I think I've had the gift of being in this community, to be allowed to speak about God and to share with people my understanding of God. Now, obviously, I'm hoping that my understanding of God and the church's understanding of God go together, but to help people to explore and to hopefully be committed better to that. I think it's helped me. I think it's been really fascinating to have circles of people. For example, I just attended a funeral on Saturday of people, I knew the parents, I taught their children, grandchildren went to school here. And I just felt, for example, that I should go to that funeral. Now, I don't know everybody's, you know, we've had quite a few people who have died, but I didn't know everybody. I didn't teach their kids, and so I know them. And the man who died, Mr. Brew, would come and he would give me a hard time. Are you sure I have to pay you? And he had this lovely Louisiana accent, and his wife would say, just pay her, just pay her. You know, it's been really interesting to develop those kinds of relationships with people. A lot of people know me, I don't know. You know, I think sometimes when they introduce themselves to me, I don't pay close enough attention to names. A lot of people know me just because of who I am. I think that's a plus, and hopefully, simply being part of this community, I help them remember that we're involved with something more than this school, this world, that we are called to heaven. We're called to the perfection of life with God, and that my presence here helps them with that. That's my hope. Now, whether it has or hasn't, I don't know. Every now and again, you have a student come back, or who was a student, former student, who said, I appreciate what you said. I have found that to be true. And I think, oh, all right, so it's worth, because, you know, the world tells you, hey, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to do it. This is what you need to be involved with. This is what's going to make you happy. Is it? Really? So, I mean, I'm not saying that the world's a horrid place. There are parts of it that are not too good, and my mind I just can't understand the violence. I can't understand just the choice for that. How does that make anything better? I have an author that I like to read right now. His name is Brad Thor, and he primarily deals with the conflict between the United States and ISIS-type groups. And one day I was reading it, and I thought to myself, is this guy heightening the antagonism between us and Islam? Or is he explaining a little better what happens when somebody is taught? Now, not all Muslims are taught this, but some Muslims, especially radical Muslims, are taught that we're the enemy, we're bad, you know, we're to be hated, and anything we do to them is what Allah wants. I'm just saying, what is going on? And so it bothers me that we're involved with that. And hopefully, as a religious, I am helping people to make choices that are more like Christ in a world where other people don't believe it, and where their choice is really to pound people, get even with people, get revenge, than trying to find a more peaceable, more acceptable for everybody's position. And I would say, and that's, you know, it seems like worse and worse and worse. And it's kind of scary. In the book that I'm just reading, it's, you know, one act of violence just leads to 10 more. And 10 more leads to 100 more. And, you know, I can't imagine why there wouldn't be some Muslims who would just say, uncle, enough already. You know, this book emphasizes that the greatest threat to Muslims are other Muslims, because you don't share our radical format. And so you become the enemy too. Well, wait a minute, you know, what's to say that your interpretation is the interpretation? Anyway, and of course, I would say the same thing with radical Christians, radical Catholics who would want to kill others before they would discuss with others. That's a problem too. You know, I don't know if that answers that question. That's a major thing, and I don't know. It's hard to deal with. It's like a hot potato, it seems to me. How do you deal with it other than you meet people, you try to respect people, you try to show reverence for them as individuals, as persons, and hope that is sufficient to help them be on your side. Now, by our side, I don't mean Catholic as it is the side of humanity, to do what helps humans live better. Like, you know, we were reading about the Peruvians, and for the life of me, I can't remember the other country that's suffering from flooding. What are we doing to help them? To recoup their homes, to have something to eat, to be able to get from place to place? Are we really helping? You know, some of the things I read from my faith says that if I have an extra anything, it belongs to somebody else. And if I don't share, I have sinned. You know, it makes me feel guilty. Like I think, does anybody want my other habit? I don't know that they'd want that. I mean, you know, literally I can't give that to them, but can I live more simply so that others may simply live? And I hope that that's what I'm about, and I hope that's what I say to people. I don't know.
My last question is, when history is written down, what would you like it to say about you?
It's a good question. I don't usually think that way, but I guess I would say that she was a person of her word and a person of the word. That when I say something, I'm going to do it, and I don't waffle. Secondly, that I have tried as much as I consciously can to follow the word, meaning Jesus, and apply it in such a way that it is a life-giving way, that people would say, yes, that they could see that. Now, I try not to walk around and say, look at what I've done, look at what this was like Jesus, that people would see that as, as it is when I meet people, just ordinary people, they have some insight as to what I'm about, and hopefully by what I do, that helps them. So I would say that, and if I do that well, then I think my existence, my being was worth it. Do that for my family, do that for my community, do that for the people I know. That's what I'd say.
Well, I really appreciate you taking
Sure.
the time to meet with me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.